So welcome to today's session, again focused on corporate purpose and incentivizing business integrity inside a company. As you may know, there's this very strong business case for strengthening integrity. Doing the right thing helps companies attract and retain top talent. It builds brand value and trust with stakeholders and communities where companies operate, and it enables the delivery of high-quality goods and services. So for today, our discussion will focus on two critical elements for promoting business integrity. The first, focusing on defining a corporate purpose that prioritizes integrity through a lens of transformational governance. This is a broader and more responsible approach to corporate governance that we put forward at the UN Global Compact, one that embeds ethical principles at the core of business operations. Our second element today will be designing effective incentive structures that nudge employees toward ethical behavior and reduce corruption risks. We'll examine how leadership, ethical culture, the design of incentives, and the use of technology can align everyday business practices with integrity and, moreover, a company's ethical purpose, fostering greater accountability, transparency, and trust. So thank you so much for joining us from all over the world as we dive deeper into how businesses can lead with integrity and benefit from it. So before we get started, just some housekeeping information. This session will be translated live and simultaneously into Spanish, French, and Portuguese. To activate this live translation in one of these languages, click on the interpretation button located in the control bar at the bottom of your screen, and then choose your language. Finally, you'll click on the Mute Original Audio button. Also, closed captions are available should you wish to use those. Today's session will also be recorded, and that recording, along with the presentation slides, will be shared with you via email in the coming days. So we hope that this session will be very interactive, and we welcome your engagement in a couple of ways. Please feel free to share any questions you have in the Zoom Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. We'll be sure to respond to some of your questions in writing throughout the session, and a few will be answered by our panel speakers during the Q&A segment of the agenda. So again, please submit your questions via that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to upvote the ones that you would like to hear answered. We'll also be looking for your participation in a Mentimeter survey in just a moment, so be ready to contribute via your phone or on your desktop. So with that, let's start off with hearing from you. You can see the instructions on the screen on how to access this Mentimeter survey. You can access it either by going to menti.com and typing in the code that you see on the screen. You can use your phone to scan this QR code and access the survey that way, or you can click on the link that is located in the chat. Our colleague Savannah has entered it into the chat for your use. We'll just give a minute to everyone to sign on to the survey and get started. So again, you can access via your desktop, clicking on the link in the chat or typing in the code at menti.com, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code and it will take you straight to the survey. Just giving a little bit longer for folks to join. So while folks are joining, we can go ahead and see the first question, which is, what topics come to mind when you think about corporate governance? What are the kind of classic conventional themes of corporate governance? I'm seeing transparency, rules, the board, risk management, integrity, reputation, whistleblowing, process. It's great to see sustainability is on there, anti-corruption is on there, risk, ethics as well. Compliance, absolutely compliance. Yes. So I'm seeing a lot of themes that do come up in conventional corporate governance, such as board oversight, internal controls, and compliance mechanisms, elements that really ensure that the organization has stability and accountability to shareholders and that it adheres to legal requirements. It's also great to see a few words that go into a more broader approach to corporate governance, something we're going to get into in today's deep dive. Words like sustainability, business ethics, thinking more broadly about a company's impact on the environment and society. And also, we're going to be touching on a company's contribution to public policies, legal frameworks, and institutions and the ecosystems where it operates. So, this is a great warm up brain teaser to start thinking about corporate governance and where we're going to go for a broader and more responsible approach. So please continue to add to this word cloud. We're going to reference this in our work in the future, but we can turn to the second question, please. So thinking about corporate purpose now, does your company match its corporate purpose with its internal organizational culture and structure via policies, procedures, programs, or norm setting? Does your stated values actually match up with your internal operations? So I see majority of folks are saying yes. We have a few no's. Many are unsure. And this is something we're again going to dive more deeply into today is the relationship between these two things, how they inform and work together, how your governance via policies, procedures, programs, norm setting can actually activate corporate purpose and how employees can understand that connection in their work. Great. So we can turn to the next question, please. So looking at that second element of today's deep dive, incentives, we'd love to know if your company already implements incentives for business integrity. I see the majority so far is saying no. We have about an equal amount of unsure and yes. So this is a great warm up to think about how incentives can actually inform culture, how employees are operating, and are we promoting integrity internally with the way our incentive schemes are organized? Okay, so we have a majority of no as the starting point. Next question, please. And then our last kind of warm up question is to what extent do you think incentives promote business integrity in a company? Regardless if your company already does it or maybe they don't, what extent do you think incentives could or already do promote business integrity in a company? Do you see a linkage there? So I see we have a majority saying highly effective, some saying somewhat effective, neutral, and then we have a handful of folks saying slightly effective or not effective at all. And this is certainly something we're going to dive more deeply into the relationship between incentives and promoting business integrity. Maybe it's the design of the incentives that inform this question. We'll be making the connection in today's technical presentation. But I see we have a majority coming in at somewhat effective. Great. Well, let's keep all of these in mind as our starting point. I'm curious to hear in the chat at the end of the session if any of you have changed your mind on your answer after today's technical presentation, but this is a great place for us to start and start thinking about these topics. I think we can now move forward in our presentation. Thank you. So just to give you a quick overview of today's agenda, we will have a quick introduction followed by technical presentations from our experts at UN Global Compact and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, followed by a panel discussion with our corporate experts with some quick Q&A, and then we'll share relevant resources and updates and next steps for our next webinar on June 5th. Next slide, please. So just a brief introduction of our presenters and speakers today. My name's Hannah Ravani. I'm the manager of the Governance and Anti-Corruption portfolio at the UN Global Compact. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ms. Gabriela Ocampo Ucha, Senior Manager of the Governance and Anti-Corruption portfolio at the UN Global Compact, as well as my colleague, Mr. Benjamin Marici, Consultant on Business Integrity at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. We're also joined by a wonderful set of corporate speakers, Mr. Carlos Villagran, Director of Risk and Compliance at CMPC, Ms. Barbara Marcen, Chief Compliance Officer at Baker & McKenzie, Mexico, Ms. Aipara Adibe, National Expert on Anti-Corruption Compliance Programs from Kazakhstan, and Ms. Tatiana Martins dos Santos Silva, Compliance Executive Manager at Electrobras. And we will give the floor to them for a quick introduction when we get to the panel discussion, but that's just a quick overview as we get started. So with that, it is my pleasure to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Gabriela Ocampo Ucha, for a technical presentation on transformational governance and corporate purpose.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you today. In today's presentation, I'll be exploring three key areas. First, what transformational governance is and why it matters. Second, how it's structured through three interconnected dimensions. And finally, how it shapes, but at the same time activates corporate purpose. By the end of this presentation, we hope that you will understand how expanding corporate governance can be a powerful driver of authentic corporate purpose and organizational integrity. So, what is transformational governance? So it's an approach that we developed at the UN Global Compact with a group of companies, which expands the traditional notion of corporate governance beyond internal controls to integrate environmental and social considerations into core business operations. It will require companies to actively shape the enabling environment, the environment in which companies are operating and the environment that they need to thrive through meaningful engagement with stakeholders, governments, and civil society. Now, the benefits of applying this TG approach, the way that we call it, is that you will be able to anticipate, for example, regulatory changes, manage risks in a holistic way, and also creating sustainable value while strengthening institutions and systems, directly supporting SDG 16, directly supporting the enabling environment in which companies operate. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is one of our favorite slides, which we call the onion, and this is about the three interconnected dimensions of transformational governance. And I think this is it's the best way for you to understand how we are expanding the notion of traditional corporate governance. First, as you can see in the center, we have conventional governance. Many of you commented on the topics that come to mind when you think of corporate governance. We want you to go a little bit beyond that. So This first section, it's about the foundation of rules and process guiding operations, the processes that are guiding the company's operations. For example, board oversight structures, compliance mechanisms, internal controls that ensure accountability to shareholders and regulatory bodies. Then the second dimension is how we are integrating environmental and social considerations into core business strategy. So sustainability regulations, how are you complying with them? And also in the absence of these regulations, how are you incorporating sustainability into your policies and decision-making? How are you incorporating your sustainability targets, for example, in your overall governance structure? And third, global governance, where businesses actively contribute to strengthening public institutions in the ecosystems where they operate. For example, companies participating in collective anti-corruption action initiatives, engaging responsibly in policy dialogue and lobbying. When all these three dimensions come together, conventional, sustainable, and global governance, is when transformational governance emerges. TG will specifically address how decisions are made, who participates in them, and how accountability is ensured. TG is about the systems and the structures that enable effective action across all aspects of sustainability. So, in essence, when we think about sustainability and sustainability targets is what we're aiming for. Transformational governance will provide the framework for how to get there and how to embed these priorities into your organizational DNA. Without a strong governance, sustainability initiatives risk becoming superficial or disconnected from core business. Next slide, please. Okay, now moving from theory to practice, transformational governance is fundamentally an integrated management approach. But what does integration really mean? So traditional management often separates sustainability, compliance, external affairs into distinct functions with their own objectives, metrics, and reporting lines. This creates silos where, for example, anti-corruption efforts might not be connected with human rights initiatives, or environmental programs might operate independently from community engagement. So transformational governance aims to break those silos by requiring companies to manage all three governance dimensions that I just mentioned, conventional, sustainability, and global governance through unified systems and processes. This approach encompasses both internal and external actions, as you can see on the screen. So, for example, when we talk about internal actions to advance transformational governance, you can see, for example, ethical leadership, incorporating sustainability into governance and decision-making, human rights due diligence, prevention of corruption. And then when we're talking about external actions, this dual aspect of how we apply transformational governance, you can see, for example, topics that in principle you don't think that are related to corporate governance, for example, peace, responsible taxation practices, the rule of law, advocacy and influence, including responsible lobbying. So this is how you advance transformational governance by advancing these actions in an integrated management approach. Next slide, please. Okay, now, what is the connection between TG and corporate purpose? In a world facing converging crises such as the former COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, financial uncertainty, social inequality, global conflict, business play a crucial role in promoting ethical leadership, building trust across sectors. Over the years, corporate purpose has evolved from maximizing shareholder returns to really creating value for multiple stakeholders while addressing societal challenges. This involves integrating principles of inclusivity, sustainability, integrity, accountability, and transparency into the very fabric of their business values, cultures, strategies, policies, and operations. So transformational governance will asks that corporate purpose be outward-looking. See, we are expanding this traditional notion of just the internal-looking aspect by recognizing the company's role in contributing to a more just and stable society and a business environment that is reflective of its values and enables a stronger economy. So DG will both shape the design of corporate purpose by integrating sustainability, but also provides a governance model that puts it into action. It provides the framework through which purpose is articulated and operationalized, and it ensures purpose isn't just a statement, but is embedded in decision-making throughout the organization. Next slide, please. Okay, now to activate corporate purpose, remember how I explained that DG will both design but also activate corporate purpose. We need to examine several topics that touch on internal and external relations. So, for example, you can see on the slide strategy and operations. So how are we integrating purpose and planning and KPIs? How are we integrating that those values into your strategy and operations? Now, second, leadership and decision making. How by creating purpose-driven frameworks, how are we incorporating that purpose and values? Education and training, helping employees understand their role in accomplishing that corporate purpose. Stakeholder engagement, by activating dialogue with communities about this purpose, business relationships, extending purpose to suppliers, advocacy and influence, something that is very important, ensuring consistency and coherence in external activities. What you are saying and promoting internally should also be activated externally through your advocacy exercises. Partnerships, how are you collaborating to amplify impact? Public reporting by building trust through transparency. So the key insight is that activating purpose isn't adding a separate initiative, but integrating purpose into all aspects of governance, creating a virtuous cycle where governance reinforces purpose and purpose guides improvements. So in conclusion, DG provides the architecture that brings corporate purpose to life, ensuring sustainability isn't just an add-on, but embedded in a company's DNA. Without strong governance mechanisms, even inspiring purposes statements risk becoming shallow promises. And this brings us to our next topic, incentives for business integrity. While governance provides the framework, incentives will drive behavior. So I'll pass it over to Hannah to take us to the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. And please feel free to add questions into that Q&A feature. Our team will continue to respond to those. As Gabby said, we will build on this, turning now to incentives for integrity. And it's my pleasure to give the floor to my colleague, Benjamin Merici, Business Integrity Consultant at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. Benjamin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, Gabby, colleagues, and distinguished participants. Yes, as you've heard, my name is Benjamin Merici. I'm currently working with UNODC as a business integrity consultant. And yeah, just to take up from where Gabby left off, the session today that I'll be presenting on will take us through the focus on incentivizing business integrity. And just to mention that one of the key reference material we'll be using for this session is the Practical Guide for Ethics and Compliance for Businesses. This is a UNODC publication from 2013, and I'm sure some of our colleagues have been able to make reference to this document in the past. Next slide, please. I'll just talk about what incentives are generally. From the poll that we've ran, we have seen quite some interesting feedback on this, and probably at the end of the event, you might be able to re-evaluate whether you've actually seen incentives operational within your businesses, within your spheres of influence. So simply stated, this could be viewed as deliberate motivators that reinforce ethical conduct and adherence to rules, policies and the like. And they are essentially designed to encourage employees and business leaders to act with integrity, following internal policies, compliance with external laws and regulations. And as part of this, the commitment from employees and the relevant business partners to these company policies and procedures forms a key determinant of the program's success. And I mean, in practice, for example, companies often design and implement anti-corruption programs, of course, in adherence or according to good practice standards. But they sometimes fall short when it comes to encouraging the employees and business partners to comply with, these values and norms. So then incentive schemes, form a good option which could be employed to support the acceptance of the overall anti-corruption program and sustain the major objective here being the reduction of corruption within the organization. Next slide, please. So as I've alluded to, this, and Gabby also mentioned this, that incentives seek to, increase desired behavior and to improve performance. And as you may be aware as practitioners, maybe some of you, incentives really are a well-established practice throughout business operations. And you can, for instance, mostly see this in the area of marketing, for example, or sales. And then the question probably is, why do we need to incentivize business integrity? So with this, incentives essentially send a strong signal about what the company regards as important. And by this, a company might consider including incentive schemes in the anti-corruption program to, show the importance of the program to them and try to generate the commitment and support for the employees and other external partners, as I've previously alluded to. So providing incentives can essentially be helpful in order to encourage this adherence to the programs, and also the partners, for example, where you do not really have a lot of effective control over. And as we will discuss in future sessions, for example, about incentives affecting external partners with, take, for example, preferential supplier status. This could stimulate the business partners' compliance with the company's policies and procedures. Next slide, please. So when we talk about incentives, there's a couple of things existing, but when we look at the two main forms of the incentives, we classify them into financial and non-financial. And the point here being that companies can actually find, an appropriate mix between, by combining these financial and non-financial rewards within their incentive schemes to foster the ethics and compliance. So if we talk about financial rewards, for example, this could include promotions, gifts, bonuses. And this would be from the internal perspective. And from an external perspective, this could include rewards for business partners, for example, as I mentioned, having access to business opportunities and preferential commercial conditions. Now, the other one on non-financial rewards, this could include recognition awards for employees, access to executive education courses, personal acknowledgement by senior management or peer recognition. And these all go really a long way in incentivizing staff. But an item to note here is the choice of incentive really should reflect on the organizational culture of the company. Because you see different organizations would have different cultures within them. And this is not an item which should be ignored, so you just need to tailor it based on what you have existing. And of course, then alongside this, one of the ways to ensure that the incentives encourage compliance would be to involve employees in establishing, for example, a catalog of financial and non-financial rewards. Next slide, please. And so practically speaking, we've often seen that existing human resource policies would often link financial and non-financial rewards to a form of productivity performance targets, KPIs, for example, the key performance indicators, and this would include financial goals, productivity targets, or the number of new customers acquired, for example. And there's a whole discussion on incentives for ethical and compliance-driven behavior, or rather the need for these incentives to be integrated within the human resource policies and performance evaluation processes. And so this, if you look at it from a practical perspective, could include aspects such as introduction into annual reviews, feedback sessions, and the assessments or periodical assessments that the organization usually does from time to time. So for this, however, this targets would need, the targets concerning the compliance and ethical behavior would need to be established. Particular aspects around the evaluation criteria and the different levels and types of incentives. This all need to be transparent and clearly documented within the HR policies. And the schemes should also exclusively apply to evaluations based on objective criteria, which are comparable and measurable. And this would include, for example, participation and performance in trainings on compliance. This could include knowledge of the company's values and norms, for instance, on the code of conduct, the willingness to, for example, question or reject dubious conduct or proposals. And last but not least, the level of active support and development of the company's anti-corruption program. So evaluations that seek to measure the criteria, such as personal values and impressions, may tend to be not fair. They can be susceptible to unfairness, so they need to be avoided so that you can really keep the item objective. And so as part of tone from the top, while we're doing all this, managers and supervisors can then be evaluated according to the degree to which they promote this criteria among their staff. And an example here would be managers being evaluated by the number of staff who've, for example, completed the compliance program in training period, and then incentives can then be offered to internal and external teams, groups, or departments based on this. And as we continue implementing these systems, then the amendment of existing incentive schemes may be necessary if then adherence to the program results in sort of unbalanced incentives. And how then do these unbalanced incentives come by? This could arise if existing productivity-based incentives induce performance pressures that make it difficult to observe ethics and compliance. An example here being financial incentives, encouraging continuous reduction in the time taken to execute sales transactions, probably leading to employees neglecting or inaccurately executing the due diligence policies. So this eventually increases the risk that employees engage in, ambiguous business transactions and the like. So then to avoid this risk, the financial incentives should appraise both performance and performance results and the business practices. Next slide, please. So implementing this incentive schemes to encourage ethics and compliance has been seen sometimes as controversial or even counterproductive by a couple of experts, with companies that consider using incentives to strengthen the values and norms of the program, considering some of the following challenges, with the first here being the balance between the targets and incentives. So then where we find any incentive scheme that, bears the risk of abuse, which needs to be addressed through adequate controls, whereby the stronger the incentive, the stronger the controls that would be needed to address this. And while incentives may not be excessive in order to ensure that employees do not focus only on achieving performance targets, they should also really not be weak to an extent where they comprise a risk for the organization. So the selection of incentives then that are relevant and proportionate to the desired performance would be one of the key factors in the success of this incentive schemes. Then on the second part about rewarding expected behavior, so then when we introduce these incentives for ethics and compliance, companies could be confronted with a claim that the behavior should, either way exist and should not be rewarded. And I think, as I mentioned before, this is one of the main arguments against incentives. But while this may seem to be based on this high moral stance, the argument ignores some practical aspects and may fail to take, for example, local and cultural differences into consideration. The schemes may support ethical and compliant behavior, which is not, self-evident for every person, and may help to foster the behavioral standards and motivation. So yeah, the incentive schemes can also reward outstanding performance and activity which support the program with voluntary activities to further develop and promote the program, not being expected as part of regular work tasks, and this can similarly be rewarded. Then on intrinsic motivation, or rather the reduction of this motivation, it's been seen that with some studies that an incentive may be perceived as a bribe itself, when employees feel that the incentive requires them to behave in a way that they essentially do not behave. So it needs to be acknowledged that the argument has some validity in relation to financial incentives, but however, positive effects of this non-financial appraisals have not really been addressed fully in empirical studies, especially. And the incentive systems that have the effect of reducing these motivations are likely to have probably been designed inappropriately. So in terms of balance of the systems, it is crucial that the incentive schemes exist in conjunction with appropriate sanction schemes to then address any form of wrongdoing. Then on subjectivity in evaluation of performance, the employees and business partners should be aware of the objective criteria that will be used to evaluate the performance. Since then, the subjective perceptions of compliance and ethical behavior could differ. And so it's very important to prevent situations where the reward is mistakenly expected for certain behavior or performance, because then what this leads to is some sort of resentment or discouragement in the whole process. And in this sense, then transparent and objective evaluation criteria can sort of help mitigate this risk. Then on unequal opportunities, it's very important for the incentive scheme not to be seen as unfair between employees and business partners. And in this sense, then equal opportunities need to be given to engage in the anti-corruption program and to receive recognition. And where we have schemes that are not perceived to be fair, and those that are limited to high-profile positions could eventually then lead to counterproductive effects. And last but not least, on rewarding of whistleblowers, I mean, the reason for rewarding these persons who report acts of corruption would be to ensure that employees and external parties are encouraged to take action when witnessing, an infringement of the company policies by colleagues or business partners. So some individuals may then refrain from reporting if they are afraid of retaliation. And in this sense, encouraging whistleblowers to use the channels available to inform about misconduct may reduce the fears of retaliation. But then, however, rewarding whistleblowing may also create a risk of leading the employees to maybe turn against each other and make false claims. And it could reduce the trust and the morale among employees and the business partners within the operations. So then companies that choose to reward whistleblowers should do a careful analysis of possible risks there, involving employees and other stakeholders in the assessment of the risk assessment and definition of appropriate incentives for the whistleblowers in this sense. Next slide, please. Then to just speak to some of the challenges and opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises. One item that comes about is promoting and incentivizing ethics and compliance are as important within these organizations as they are in large companies. But then, of course, one of the most obvious things is then the provision of financial incentives could imply a strong financial burden to small and medium-sized enterprises. And maybe one of the ways which could then be used to sort of address this concern is that the SMEs could focus on the provision of non-financial incentives for ethical and compliant behavior, since mostly due to the limited number of employees within SMEs, they could enjoy a higher degree of familiarity and stronger personal bonds than larger multinational companies. So in this sense, then the non-financial incentives could be a more effective way to recognize ethical and compliant behavior of employees. And the emphasis on this rewards may also result in lower levels of financial and operational controls, less bureaucracy, for example, in providing of the rewards. And the small number of employees also make it easier for senior management to signal acknowledgement in an informal way. So I think with this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I hope you've been able to grasp some of the key insights, which will then be emphasized in our follow-up discussions. Over to you, Hannah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I see we have some folks entering questions into the Q&A feature. That's great. Our team is working to answer you. Please continue to add in your questions, also as our panelists begin this deep dive discussion. So with that, we will turn to our panel discussion segment. I already briefly introduced our speakers, but would love for each of you to start by introducing yourself briefly and saying a little bit about the work you currently do and how it relates to today's topic. Carlos, I'll start with you, please.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Hannah. My name is Carlos Vieira Muñoz. I'm from Chile. I'm an attorney. I work as a chief risk and ethics compliance for CMPC, which is a Chilean multinational holding company, leading in the sales of products of pulp, paper, and other related forest-based related products. My role, well, I started working first 100% on ethics and compliance sector. That's my specialty, of course. But since at least a couple of years, I'm now in charge of what we call the ERM, the Enterprise Risk Management Program of my company. So I will share with you some of the work that we have been doing in terms of managing those two programs. A bigger one, which is the framework of the company, the risk management program and the ethics program, and how transformational governance can help introduce those two powerful tools, corporate governance tools, into our daily duties and decision-making process.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And Barbara, I'll hand it to you next.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Barbara Marcén. I'm from Mexico City. I'm working in Baker McKenzie, the law firm, and I'm holding the position of compliance officer in Mexico. And also 5 years ago, I created a movement of women that is called Mujeres en Compliance. And for me, to impulse integrity, ESG compliance is something that make me very happy, because make me feel congruent with what a human being has to be doing in an environment to become like a society more sustainable. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much. And Aipara, I'll pass it to you now.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Aipara. I'm very honored to be part of this panel session for the first time. So I'm from Kazakhstan, and for the most of my important experience I gained from working at Beeline Kazakhstan as a head of ethics and compliance. Beeline Kazakhstan is a part of VEON, Vimpelcom company before, and there was a Vimpelcom case related to FCPA and monitorship. So this case gave me a big experience in building the transformation, the ethics and compliance program. For the last 2 years, I'm engaged in training and implementing anti-corruption programs in state-owned organizations in Kazakhstan. So this is about me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tatiana.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank UNODC and the Global Compact for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about my experience and my vision about transformational governance. And well, I'm Tatiana Silva. I'm based in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at Eletrobras, that it's a leader in renewable energy sector in Latin America. I have this background in communication and governance, and I have a deep interest in people and their behaviors, and this faith in continuous evolution. And I have been leading the compliance area here at Eletrobras for about 4 years. I was also in charge of the governance of the company when during the company's privatization in 2022. And our current main challenges now are the internalization of the risk and opportunity management culture and the implementation of mechanisms to influence compliance in the value chain. So I'm very happy to be here and hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have all of your great experience and expertise on our panel for today's discussion. So let's get started on the first topic of today. And Aipara, I'll give you the first question here. We'd love to hear from your experience. How do you think companies can authentically define a corporate purpose that is rooted in integrity rather than branding?
Thank you, Anna. So as I mentioned before, one of the most meaningful experiences in my career was my 10 years at Beeline Kazakhstan. So at that period, I was supporting the company with the transformation period, and we had to move beyond formal compliance program to build a system, integrity system. As our Beeline CEO told us, the only thing that should differentiate, set apart us from the competitors is our compliance program, compliance culture. So corporate purpose rooted in integrity is not something that the company is defining what they are achieving. This is about how they are achieving. Yes, if we take, for example, education or healthcare, education industry is clear. It exists in order to provide education, in order to empower students. Healthcare, for example, it exists to treat or protect patients, yes, and they can achieve their purposes by different ways. For example, university can choose to lower academic standards in order to increase admission. The healthcare can push useless, unnecessary treatments in order to raise the profit. So that is why our purpose is to make this integrity visible, doable, and clear, yes, for the employees. Actually, from practical point of view, what I observed is that employees never believe in something abstract. And at the same time, integrity is not something abstract. It's quite a visible operational thing, yes? So our duty, our support is making, embedding this integrity into daily operations. So how we do this? What does this mean? Yes, to embed this into daily operations. If we recruit, so transparent recruitment standards should be clear to employees. They have to see operationally why we are applying transparency, why we are doing due diligence, why we are making the declaration of conflict of interest, not because this is a system, not because this is a process, but because we want to raise the ethical decision-making points in the business. Real business partner due diligence, not selective ones. Another example from my practice was when, for example, the donation, yes, when the company provides charitable contribution. From first sight, for the employees, it could be a simple process. Okay, my company is providing charitable contribution. But when you ask CEO or top management to support this process with the communication about the compliance protocol behind it, for example, why we do due diligence, why we request documents, and then share the whole process till the end, how we provide this donation, people start believing and they see that this integrity is fully embedded into the daily operations. But the challenge is that it will not happen in one day. It will not happen during first year, second year. It will take an average 3 years in case we do these discipline actions and constantly communicate, constantly embed, test our controls, and show people that integrity works in every day. So making this ethical decision making some kind of benefit for the company. So I think this one is maybe crucial.
Thank you so much, Aipara. And building on your points about embedding corporate purpose into operations and thinking also about this transformational governance approach being a tool or methodology to accomplish this, I'll turn to you, Carlos, to hear more on what can transformational governance look like in business operations, such as yours, and what are its ripple effects on organizational culture?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for the invitation. Well, when it comes to CMPC and how transformational governance looks in our business operation, first of all, it looks exactly as seeing the ESG factors, embedded into the company core decision-making process. And now, how do we do that? Is through an integrated management approach, which is one of the core principles behind transformational governance. How do we do that? Through a common governance. We manage our risks through a common governance within the company. We use a similar methodology, which means that throughout the organization, we speak the same language. And also we use the same reporting tools, which is critical and crucial to comply with transparency requirements. Now, as for the methodology, the first step to get those ESG factors to be part of the core decision-making process, first, what we use is that we have this ERM, this enterprise risk management process, or management model, I will say, which provides a common methodology, a common framework for the whole organization. Similar concepts, criteria, how to disclose and to evaluate risks. I think that everything, start with that. Risks are natural for all business operations. They are, you need risk to improve, to gain advantages in your markets, of course. But first of all, you need to assess those risks and evaluate the control. So how do we provide that integrate approach? First, again, with this methodology. Secondly, we have some cross-functional initiatives that are going through the organization at this current moment, which are, for example, climate change evaluation that we're doing, human rights due diligence, and double materiality. These are just 3 quick examples of initiatives that are part of a transformational governance framework, since they are managed throughout the company by a common governance structure, similar bodies, committees, workforce task forces within the company that actually help to, even if they are different initiatives, they have different goals and approaches to different problems, right? From climate change to double materiality, for example. The response that is given by the company throughout the company to our business operations it's common. It's made through a common, again, methodology that also works in other programs within the company that are part of this common corporate governance framework, which it comes related with corporate community relationships as well. How do we measure the effectiveness of our programs and how we report those goals, especially when it comes to ESG performance. And finally, of course, what we do in terms of third parties throughout our what we call I will say our supply chain value. Supply chain value chain, I will say, that we evaluate on a regular basis our third parties, so we can guarantee that those third parties are also complying with our ESG standards and are part of our framework as well. Now, how does that impact our culture? I will say that in our experience, transformational governance is what helps to create and to make a cohesive and consistent narrative throughout the organization. We talk about our purpose, our corporate purpose, our values. We have our leadership seal, but what really helps to glue everything, to put everything under the same narrative, is transformational governance. Because it's really help us to get into the gears of the decision-making process. So transformational governance is a way to shape, our corporate purpose, provide a governance that put everything in motion, in action. And in our particular case, we are a natural resources company. Part of our purpose is to, create products that helps the world for a better future. Well, we do that through ethical and responsible decisions, and that's part again of what makes everything coherent is our transformational governance framework.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for those examples of what TG can look like in a company's operations. And you also touched on something else that is necessary to both implement TG and activate corporate purpose, which is leadership. So Barbara, I would love to hear from you about what role do you think leadership plays in ensuring that integrity is not just aspirational, but it's actually operationalized? And moreover, what can leadership do internally and externally?
Thank you very much, Hannah. I'm going to share some slides that I prepared for today. So I'm very happy to be here and to be able to learn from all of you and to have the ability to also to share some points that I think are important in these days. So one of the things that I would like to share is the context that we are living. We're living in a context that is highly in a period of changes. Technology is changing everything with AI. Now we can see that how it has been accelerating the past year, I think so. And another thing that is going to become very strong, and also Carlos has been mentioned, is the supply chain. Supply chain with the technology is going to be making a huge revolution in the future. And also the digital bank. We have been hearing about new coins in the digital cryptos, that they are going to be part of the European community, the US. And with this, I would like to link with leadership. So leadership is one of the most important values in this stage of our era. Without leadership, we cannot make any kind of implementation of culture. But when we talk about the role of leadership, I would like to really focus on three things that are the main important. One is the implementation of integrity programs, including all these tendencies of ESG and also sustainability. We cannot create a huge vision without having a role of leaders. Also, the embracing of integrity culture in the organization and engage the value of leadership. So here the important part is when we talk about leadership, we are talking about how we all of us, we conduct in an organization. But also it's very important that we can have like the support in the implementation of project of the top management. Something that I have been reviewing, watching, listening from other colleagues is that in some corporations, we don't really have the support of the top management. And if we don't have that support in the top of the pyramid, it's going to be very difficult to make a cascade culture to the other leaderships. Because of course, if you are going to have like someone pushing only to revenue, the other leaders are going to be doing the same. So leadership is everything nowadays, and they have to help us to create the structure and the culture to create a foundation, develop an expansion of these programs. Here I put like some icons of the most important things that a leader has to ensure. Of course, like the specific programs or the specific leaders of ESG, sustainability and compliance, we are going to be in charge of the implementation. But if we don't have a leaders that support each of these icons, no, the independency, the risk management, the data, and they are not going to make like the process flowing, because anything is going to happen in the next years. So, because as you know, nowadays to create a culture of integrity, sustainability of ESG, there are like more than 40 programs rolling, programs of environmental, social, finance, UBO, anti-money laundering, transparency, artificial intelligence, data privacy. So we have a lot of programs that we have to implement. So without leadership, this is not going to be able to happen. Embracing integrity culture to organization, I see this into 3 stages, to embrace really this culture. One is the top that we have been talking, that he has to act by example, without him acting in a transparency, congruent, sustainable way, because nothing is going to happen in the corporation. And the most horrible part is that nothing is going to happen in the world. And of course, he has the point that he has to implement the risk structure so that the number 2, compliance, can create the prevention programs. And the areas has to ensure the correct synergy to make the implementation, because as we can see, the future of the world is going to be a compliance world. We are going to have, with technology, AI, supply chain, and the bank, a lot of programs that they are not going to be able to run without a verification of compliance. And the last slide, engage the values of leadership. We have to create a trainer for leaders, sales force, marketing, all the top management, and also a training that we can cascade like through all the organizations, so that we can have a structure in which it's not only compliance, it's not only sustainability, it's not also ESG, it's really a culture of congruence in which we can, all of us, do what is necessary to do and what is right. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for touching on this new global context that businesses are operating in, and the importance of ethical leadership and anticipating and also responding to that context. So thinking about what else is needed for a company to be successful in this type of effort, Tatiana, what are some of the key principles companies should adopt when shifting towards a more integrated and responsible governance model, transformational governance? And moreover, how can having the right principles and governing framework actually benefit a company, especially in complex or high-risk business environments?
Yeah, I think for governance to be truly transformational, it is necessary to for all levels of the company to be aligned regarding the strategy, objectives, social and market context, and risk appetite. I think it seems difficult, and it is, but I think it's a good start to go back to the basics on the technical capacity of managers in medium and high complexity decision making. I think it's sort of easy to establish a training program that reaches everyone in the company, and it's relatively straightforward to maintain this program, but with satisfactory and reliable results regarding knowledge of the code of conduct and the main rules of ethical conduct. In theory, it works. What should be exercised, I think, daily is a principle, is the risk, as a principle, is the risk appetite. Is the clear intrinsic and the notion that in every decision made, that every opportunity implies risks, and that every risk exists because there is an opportunity. And from this premise, which makes a vision of the risks involved as a natural thing, based on a clear company directive, it is possible to build and maintain this governance model that everybody could understand with responsibility and each level and as shared. I believe in shared responsibilities. And more ethical, transparent, and accountable governance structure favors the construction of a more positive external perception of the company for shareholders and investors. And of course, we're talking about risk management, but mainly about creating an environment of safe, reliable, and prosperous business opportunities for all parties. And this approach, I think, it's beyond the company's walls, because, of course, we need to establish and maintain an integrity environment within the company, but the company does not exist alone. So there is an entire value chain formed by third parties and by people and other companies with whom we interact and with whom these relationships need to be ethical and with integrity. And for them to be this way, we need to understand the context of action and how these companies organize themselves to do business with us. Brazil is a very large country and with very different realities. There are very large and very small companies. There are companies, suppliers, and partners. There are structured in compliance programs that it's functioning. And there are others where even basic compliance with legislation, not only anti-corruption, but also environmental and human rights duties, for example, is it's hindered by a lack of structure. In this case, it is up to large companies like us, like Eletrobras, to positively influence the business environment. For these, the sharing of best practices, the sharing of tools, training, public-private partnerships, and the entire range of instruments that can be used to seek, with the lowest possible cost, of course, the best results. I think they are, all of these tools are valid. And I believe that today the biggest challenge of large companies is to establish and maintain not only a compliance program for the inside, but a compliance program that truly reaches the value chain outside its walls. It's like a relational compliance. So I think that the risk appetite, it's something that we should learn more about and to establish on a daily basis in our companies.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, for speaking to the linkages between a company's internal and external actions and the importance of there being coherence between the two, and also the importance of a principles-based approach driving operations, especially in complex business environments. So turning now to our second topic of the day, how companies can drive ethical behavior internally through incentives. Barbara, I'm going to give the floor back to you, and we'd love to hear what do you see as the common pitfalls in incentive systems that could lead to ethical blind spots? And how can we avoid creating such perverse incentives? And does organizational culture have an impact here?
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think to talk about incentives is something very important because as we know, all organizations that are based on revenue and are based on sales, they create an incentive system that has been there for a couple of years, I can say, like, I don't know since when, we create this program of incentive. In the part that is in gray, I try to show, like all these incentive cells that we have in organizations, just make bonus for achievement of goals, they give commissions, they make incentives on travel, salary, exposure. And of course, all the people that are in charge of making the revenue of the companies, they are gonna be working very hard to obtain that. But nowadays, things has been changing, and the idea is how to create like a good revenue in a company, but in a framework of sustainability, compliance, integrity. And one of the things that we have to know and we have to start expanding is the creation of new incentives. So these new incentives are the ones that they are in white. They are like organizations that they are like creating this pay for performance, for compliance, or for ESG or for sustainability, that as you know, one of the part of the corporate governance of these three, sustainability, compliance, and ESG, is to create this figure of pay of performance of the creation of these programs. But I'm not saying this or here as part of the compliance team or ESG team. This is the second one that I'm going to explain. And this one is like attached with revenue, but results with compliance. What does that mean? That I already achieved my goals, but I achieved my goals in compliance with rules, regulations, culture. Maybe make an incentive because they train his area, they make a train the trainers, or in a convention, they decided to put all the people together or make communications to their areas. So this is something that is gonna incentivize all the leaders of the areas to create really programs that can create the implementation of programs or the implementation of the culture. The second one is specifically for people of compliance. As we know, we work on the implementation of preventing programs through a risk analysis. But sometimes we create much more programs that are passing the framework of the risk compliance or much more activities. So that also can incentivize the compliance team so that they can create like more efforts that they can arrive to a lot of other people. In your previous question, what the leadership has to do inside and outside the corporation, one of the things that we have to think for the future is, as I mentioned, the supply chain. Know your suppliers, know your clients, and that is something that is so complex and so important. There are corporations that they have thousands of providers or clients, and the efforts are very significant so that we can achieve and touch each of these people of the supply chain. So this kind of incentive can help the compliance team to override their own goals that they have for 1 year so that they can achieve more, so that they can have an incentive to create ethical standards. And the third one, I don't know if you agree with me, there are a lot of activities, that is the pay for performance culture, a lot of activities of collaborations, of champions, on diversity, of inclusions, events, of social impact and environmental, that nowadays corporations are like inviting employees to a lot of activities. No, we have the Day of Diversity and Inclusion in Mexico. So, but you're gonna go on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday, no? And this is time that is more time for your family than the time of corporation. So all those activities in which really the collaborators, they are doing an effort to create a culture inside and outside to generate an impact in society. They have to have a tracking in which you can say at the end, when they have like the pay of their bonus, like, okay, thank you for collaborating and creating the culture because you assist to 7 events that they were out of the common agenda of your work, no? So these are like 3 incentives that I propose, no? And that they can make a change in the future. And something, this is the last point, is that we cannot do this alone. We have to make a huge synergy with human resources in which we can start again and put in smart objectives and really put a space on compliance. In the past, I was in a company in which they really put an objective in relation with ethical and doing the things right. But if the ethics, the compliance, the ESG and the sustainability is not part of really the objectives of the business, nothing is going to happen. So we need to ensure that we have objectives, that the people and the proper people can make the feedback about the congruence, the review of the performance connection review, and then create balanced compensation plans and long-term compensation plans that they include this so that we can really work all together in the creation of this kind of cultures. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for illustrating some examples of different types of incentives and also touching on the relationship to supply chains. Just to quickly note, that will be the topic of our next webinar deep dive. So there's definitely relationships there that we're going to explore next time as well. So
thank you.
Thank you. Turning back to you, Carlos, from your experience, what incentive models have you seen or used that genuinely drive ethical behavior without encouraging shortcuts?
Thank you, Hannah. You know, that's a very sharp question in the sense that most incentive models, even well-intended ones, can, you know, unintentionally create loopholes or foster, you know, shortcut seeking, you know, if they are not carefully designed. Normally, when I think about incentives, I'm thinking about those kind of incentives that my commercial and sales team have, you know, to comply with their goals. So I have pretty much I wouldn't say a negative approach to incentives, but in any case, they are high risk, you know, nudge in terms of changing people's conduct. So we have to be very careful with that. Now, when it comes to incentive to promote you know, ethics conduct, again, not a huge fan of incentives, not because of what they mean or the goal you are, you know, you're seeking with those incentives, but how do you manage those incentives? You know, I think that depends of a lot on local, cultural, or it depends of some industries, and of course it will depend on the maturity of your ethics and compliance programs. You know, now I have 2 examples of what we have been doing in CMPC as a way of you know, trying to try or to as a test on how these kind of incentives can work to promote ethical behavior. The first one is that we are, in some particular cases, we are, when we see an employee that actually not only reports misconduct, but actually actively works and helps throughout the investigation process and get involved in the, you know, in the corrective actions, you know, just to, you know, in order to prevent recurrence of those issues. When we are seeing that kind of a real, I would say, ambassador, you know, of a real, you know, actor in the ethics environment in our company, we talk directly to their direct report, to their bosses, to the other executives of the company. So that can be considered as a reason, as an argument, I would say, as a factor to consider that person to be promoted. And why do we talk about promotion? Because we have seen through different surveys within the company that promotion is a very strong message within companies. Because through promotion, the company is saying, these are the kind of guys, these are the kind of executives, our employees and collaborators we want to see thriving within the company. These are the examples we want the rest of the organization to seek, to look and to follow. So we believe that promotion is a very powerful tool, and we have been using promotion to link it with internal investigation when we see those cases in which people are giving the extra mile, in the sense not only reporting, but actually being part of the solution. So unfortunately, that's something difficult to escalate, to make it a more global program. It's not always objective, unfortunately, but we are trying to link that, given that one of our main values is integrity and courage, so this is an example of that courage. And the second example I have, it's more on the financial side of incentives, is that as part of our, annual compensation or bonus, performance bonus, part of that evaluation, that performance evaluation, refers to how we comply and we follow our, our values, and our ethical commitments within the company. So we were now working with HR. So far, this is a test phase, I would say, to make it, to move or to use data that we capture throughout our ethics and compliance processes and controls to make it part of that process as well. Of course, first of all, our executives will consider if you have complied with your objectives, with the commercial objectives or the business objectives. I'll say, of course, that's not wrong. But then we want them to have directly access to how our employees are behaving on a regularly basis when it comes to internal investigations, conflict of interest, trainings, and other key initiatives that actually are showing how much that person is involved and engaged in our integrity commitments. Now the goal there is to make it a more broad and more escalated, program, I would say, in a way, more objective also. But again, in the end, we're not planning to go any further when it comes to incentives, because again, we believe that, especially we operate throughout Latin America, everywhere, and we believe that we have to be very cautious when it comes to incentives, especially if they're financial ones, because we have had in the past some examples on how those incentives have helped, unfortunately, created subcultures, and to create deviation in our conducts that in the end, promotes misconduct. So again, not a huge fan. We are trying, we are seeing how it's working, but I think that when you think about incentives, you have to think how that the impact those incentives will have in the rest of the organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carlos, for sharing your experience on incentives. And building on your points about managing those incentives and testing their effectiveness, learning about what works and what doesn't work, Aipara, we'll turn it to you on how do you actually design metrics to evaluate integrity without overcomplicating performance measurement? What role can data analytics and digital tools, for example, play in monitoring or rewarding ethical behavior?
Thank you, Anna. In fact, we don't have to measure the integrity by adding the more metrics. There is a risk always that we as experts want to support the company with more metrics, yes? Because if we make the system complicated, the metrics complicated, people will not be engaged. So engaged in integrity. Our purpose is to engage employees into integrity. That is why integrity metrics must evolve. They evolve actually, because it all depends on the maturity level of your company. So at the beginning, during the first 2-3 years, the metrics can be about the training completions, hotline activity, how employees follow the procedures, policies, if they are clear or not. But later, when you raise this integrity as a culture, so culture-based approach, then you can measure, for example, early reporting, yes, or ethical leadership, prevention capabilities of the company. So metrics must match the organization's maturity level. It is crucial because this is what I'm observing now in different companies where ethics and compliance program is just starting to be implemented, and in comparison with those companies where the compliance culture is already developed for many years. So the approach is different. I would recommend maybe 3 focus on very operational behaviors. For example, we can measure whether people report risks and dilemmas earlier. What it means, for example, the procurement specialists, do they raise concerns about tender specifications before or during the tender, or before they start the tender, or after that? And if the reporting signals show lower indicators, then it may talk about the silent pressure that they have within the organization. Or, for example, the second one is whether managers resolve ethical concerns without escalation. This is also, I think, important because strategically, our final point is to create a culture where, for example, compliance as a function doesn't exist, but all the operational functions, they know how to act, how to take ethical decision on their own, yes, without, for example, compliance function, without support of the compliance function. That is why if we, for example, measure how many issues are fairly addressed at the team level without needing formal investigations, then this feedback from employees also can show the involvement, engagement, level. The third one, whether teams follow transparent process when no one is watching. What does this mean? We know that for example, yes, we monitor the procurement teams, still apply full process of due diligence, even in those contracts where with low risk. Yes, where there is a low risk, we know that the due diligence process is not so big as like in high risk, for example, applied for high risk business partners. That is why these 3 approaches could be useful. As for the digital approach, it is when integrity metrics attract through dashboard and analytics, it is about objective approach. It is important. So compliance isn't seen as someone's subjective burden. Yes, and everyone see the data. They see that everything is neutral, credible, data-driven, and the decisions are made on the basis of the data. So by digitalizing, making digital the compliance program, we can ensure that all the decisions are taken on the correct way, not subjective, but objective way. That is why, so this affects on the perception, yes? And it also may talk about that the company is not living with the understanding that no mistakes. Yes, this is impossible. We do make mistake, but the company knows how to respond to this mistake. Yes, it has a good ability to respond these mistakes. That is why they take the responsibility. They make good audit trails. They make the tools digital and make the compliance objective. So this is quite important, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Aipara. And Building on mistakes, when a company is reevaluating an existing incentive scheme, Tatiana, what are the red flags that might indicate misalignment with ethical or governance principles?
Yeah, I think the first one regarding with corporate governance is lack of transparency and imbalance in the granting of recognitions and rewards in terms of value and position of the individual that was rewarded, and misalignment with the business, of course. And when we talk about incentive and recognition policies, regardless of the type of the program. Currently, we talk about much less about how much it costs or the maximum value, and much more about how that reward aligns with the company's values and the business itself. And if we are in a company which business is clear and renewable energy, it is important that the rewards programs and incentive programs reinforce these messages that the company wants to convey. When we talk about granting of bonuses and results, such as for example, exceeding performance targets or savings in contracts, I think attention should be on the construction of these targets. If they are too easy to surpass, they do not meet the basic requirements of balance and excellence. It's expected, of course, expected excellence, and in its case, may favor certain people, certain individuals. And I think this applies to all levels of the company. And Carlos brought us some examples of what employees of rewards to employees and compensation programs. And I would like to talk about the tone at the top and the incentives for the board of directors, and how this policy can be positive to reinforce these goals, these objectives, like Aypara said, objective goals, integrity goals, and most of our risk mitigation, that's what we want to do. So it's not about back into the example, if the difficult, if the target's too difficult or it's impossible, this combined with loose controls, it can encourage the breaking of compliance criteria or unethical behaviors in pursuit of these their achievement of these goals. It's not about just monitoring the achievement of targets. The key, I think, is to think about the risks embedded in opportunities from the beginning, and to have these a greater vision that does not allow a specific incentive program to end up harming other areas of the company's operations. From a compliance restricted perspective, it is important that we have multipliers of messages and good practices and people who encourage the continuous evolution of compliance within the company. And the commitment of these people deserves rewards, deserves recognition, of course. But the form of this recognition is just as important. For example, giving cash prizes or doing the right thing, I don't think it's the best solution. Or for whistleblowers, and I understand that I don't think it's a very easy answer. That's no a program, incentive program that fits all the companies. And I understand that each company has to discover the best way to recognize merit and commitment and the results, the achievement of the results and ethical behavior within all this. focus on alignment with these values and purpose. And I think just to finish, I think on the other hand, we have to exemplarily punish the bad behavior. I think impunity fuels bad behavior, and transparency about the management of consequences for unethical behavior is a powerful tool for to align objectives, in my opinion. So I think the companies needs to make clear its tolerance for unethical behavior, regardless of who presents it, which level it is. And the best way to do this is by being accountable and be transparent. And as we are experiencing these kind of purpose crisis, people with heavy workloads and goals are thinking why they are feeling bad in their jobs. And I think in this context, the rewards needs to be even more well thought out, because it's an essential instrument for retaining talent. So it's not just about money, it's about purpose. And people feeling that they are making a difference. So that's it, I think. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. You shared such great concrete examples and expertise and insights. We really appreciate your time and contributions to the discussion today. And I do see that we are at the end of our webinar deep dive for the day. So we are going to just hand the floor to our colleague Benjamin to just go over some resources and an update on our next webinar session before we close for the day. Thank you so much again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and our dear panelists for the session there. Yes, as Hannah said, we have a couple of resources here that we would request you to have a look at. Some of them, we've already mentioned them in the course of our presentations. You can see there's a whole mix between items from that help you on transformational governance to the topic of incentivizing business integrity. We also have our portal here that offers many more resources from our end. So maybe just to mention that this all will be sent to you in the coming days as part of the presentation, so that we don't have to linger here for too long. Moving on to the next slide, we have our following session on the 5th of June on anti-corruption in the supply chain, fighting corruption in the supply chain and management of value chains. This will also be included in the presentation. You can also access this on the chat box, so you can already register and be updated on the next happenings. And thank you very much for your time. And if we go to the previous slide now, we would kindly request you to share your feedback with us on how you found the session. This really goes a long way in helping us to tailor and make the subsequent sessions better for you in terms of experience and the content. Yeah, so maybe if you can just scan this QR code. A link, I believe, has also been provided in the chat if it's easy for you to access. And thank you very much for your time as you continue to do this very brief evaluation. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you so much. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webinar deep dive. It's been a pleasure to have you all, and we hope to see you on June 5th in our next session.